Hi friends, BB here, and I have another fun journal spread to share with you guys. And I'm starting out with a digital download as my main source of inspiration for what I'm going to do. And in fact, when I started enhancing this digital download, I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to use it. And I actually ended up using it in a couple different ways. But in this video, I'm going to show you inside one of my handmade journals, and I love how the page ends up. So I get asked a lot about digital downloads. I have them in my shop. I offer them once a month. I send a freebie to my email subscribers. In fact, this is March 2024's freebie. I'm going to put that link down below. If you want to download it for yourself, feel free. You can print it out as many times as you want and use in your own artwork. So I get asked about the colors, and it never looks as vibrant in person after you print it out as it does on screen. And as much as that is annoying, there's not too much you can do about it. Of course, having a good printer helps, but even me, and I've invested in a pretty nice printer, it's never as vibrant as the artwork originally was. And of course, I always compare it to what the original looked like, but we have to think about digital downloads, I think, a little bit differently. So we can't compare them as apples to apples. We have to compare them as two different things, and we can appreciate them in different ways. So in this one, I like to use a digital download as a great starting off point. And then I'm going to take it and enhance it and really bring out some of those vivid colors and make it so that I actually want to use it in my artwork. If it felt really muted and lackluster, it wouldn't be something that I would be excited about working with. And I'm not going to put things in my journal or work with them that I'm not excited about. I'd rather just go make something else. But instead, I like to take it and add additional art marks to it. Maybe add back in some of that color. Add in those pencil scribbles. The white out correction pen is really great because it marks over everything, but it also leaves a little bit of a texture on the page. And I love the raised dimension that it adds. I'm not concerned about trying to use the exact same colors or the exact supplies that I originally created this page with. I'm more focused on using the cues from the page that are already there to kind of enhance it further. So I do this with my own digital downloads that I've scanned in and created from my own artwork, but also if I purchase one from another artist, I'm going to take the cues that are already there and then enhance it further. It's just going to bring your page to life in a lot of new ways. When you work on creating papers at home and you're making, I love the texture that they have. Usually they end up a little bit wrinkled because we added water. Maybe they have indentations from pencil scribbles, that kind of thing. When it comes straight out of the printer, it doesn't have the exact same feel to it. So that doesn't mean that I'm not going to use them. It just means that I'm going to adapt and make them into something that I'm excited about using. So you can go as deep into this as you want, or just add a few little subtle marks is going to make a big difference, I think. I'm adding back in some of that color. I'm also adding in marks, like you can see here, that weren't in the original design. So you can really take this to whatever level you want. And in fact, I think these printables make a really great jumping off point. Say that you're not feeling as inspired and you don't know what you want to be doing. You could just print one of these off and then start doing your own marks on it. Start with going over some of the marks that are already there. And then I think your brain will stop overthinking a little bit and just start wanting to make your own marks. So it's a really fun way to get you started. And if you only have 5 minutes of time, how easy would it be to just add a few marks to one of these sheets? So you can do a lot of different things. You can now use this as any other paper that you would. I have been finding myself using them a lot more in my artwork. I even use them when I create a journal as some of the base pages. There's a lot of really fun things you can do. And I think makes it so it's not so limiting when I add in that oomph and make things feel a bit more vivid. So I pulled out one of my journals that I think it would go really well in. The theme of this one is all pinks and reds, and so it feels like it fits really well. The fun thing about this handmade journal too is I have not actually bound my two signatures to the journal cover yet, and so it actually makes it a lot easier to pull out and work on. Just one thing that I'm trying out, I don't ever do things the exact same way more than once, and so it's fun to try out those different things. I'm playing around with the placement of how I want this. I'm not putting the entire sheet in, but you can already see once I put this down, once I adhere it to the page, what a great starting point that is. And the journal page is almost completely done. Of course, I'm going to keep adding more, but it makes it so that the whole page, that blank page, feels a lot less intimidating because I already got a really great starting off point. So I'm actually attaching this page that's bound into the signature down onto the black sheet. So instead of doing like a journal spread between the black and the back of that graph paper, I'm just going to adhere that down. And that's just like if I were to come in and collage any other piece of paper onto it. The only difference is this one was already bound into the journal. I think I'm going to keep the full height of this one and just let it take up the main focus on the left side of the page here. And I'm just fiddling around. I have a natural instinct for where I want things to go once I look at the page, but that doesn't mean that it's always the best choice. I like to think about a few different ways. You could see that I tried to look at it on the right side of the page too, but in the end, I'm just going to go with my instincts. And if we spend too long trying to debate all the choices, I find that I start overthinking things and it's harder to get into that workflow. So I'm adding in some paint, and this is just a white gesso. I'm just wanting to kind of, distress is not the right word, but just to get some texture down so that I can start creating. I don't want to have just that all blank page happening or plain page. And I think especially since the other was a digital download, it makes it fun now to add in some more paints on these pages as well. This is just a dry brush. I'm not trying to add in a lot of water at all on these ones. And I like the look of just that dry gesso on there. And now with a chunky pencil, just adding in some messy script. And that's not meant to be read at all. It's just meant to act as a kind of pattern on the page. And really, besides flipping through this journal and determining that this would be a fun page to put this printable on, I didn't have more of a plan than that. And so I just took that spark and went with it. So I'm still really figuring out what I'm doing as I go along here. And actually, I would be okay if I just stopped here. Not necessarily saying that the page was done, but just putting this in my journal. And if that's all I was inspired to do, then just leaving it at that and coming back to it later, it would make another really great jumping off point. I still was feeling inspired, and so I wanted to keep adding some stuff in. And now I know that I want to get some texture on this page. So this is actually some fabric that I created out of thread. I thought that might be kind of fun. I had recently made it, and so I wanted a reason to use it. And part of getting to actually use some of those things is just cutting off a piece of it so it's ready to use. Sometimes when we leave things in their entirety, or like even the digital download as a full page, I needed to rip it down and start cutting it in order to feel like I could start using it. It's kind of a funny thing. You come back from like the fabric store and you buy, say, even half a yard of fabric. When it's sitting there in that big bulk like that, it makes it kind of harder to use. So something that I've started to do is just tear off a smaller piece of it and then put it in with all my other working fabrics, or even I got some larger papers on my last vacation trip, and they are like so big they can be rolled up. Now, I'm not going to go and rummage through those when I'm in the middle of making a journal spread. So what I did is I just tore off some piece of it that was a lot more manageable. And so that makes it so I'm actually going to want to use that and grab for it in my artwork. I can put it in my collage fodder bowl. I can put it in my different scrap bins by color, things like that where I'm actually going to reach and use it. And then that triggers my brain once I run out of that smaller piece that I have more of it and I can go rip off another piece of it. I think that's a good way to manage some of your bigger pieces of either fabric or paper in your studio so that you're actually using the things that you buy or you create rather than them just going to sit off and wait for the quote unquote perfect project to use it in. So I'm continuing on here. I added a few little pieces of collage. I'm adding in more paint. And whenever I do larger pieces of collage, or I guess collage in general, I like to kind of float it into the background and kind of integrate it a little bit more. And so I made sure with the gesso that I was actually going over some of those edges. I wasn't treating the edge of the paper as a boundary that I couldn't cross. I think that's easy sometimes, and then your work can feel a little bit disjointed. And so with this, I just was really messy and kind of heavy with the gesso. And I thought that was a good opportunity. While I was drying it, I decided it would be fun to take a wooden skewer and create some marks in it. And it's kind of the negative, taking away the paint instead of adding paint to create a mark. And I'm thinking about how I can add in some more texture onto this page. And so fabric is always a great choice for me. I had recently painted this fabric just with some simple marks on it. And so I tore off a piece so it was easier to use. And now I'm doing some just simple stitching with some yarn, and I'm just accentuating the marks that are already there. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, and I'm just going inside each one that I want to add a little bit more oomph to. It'd be like if you're marking on paper and you add in some kind of ghost art marks with the real art marks, things like that. So, I'm not trying to do anything too crazy. I'm just doing those marks with stitching instead of coming back in with a marker or more paint or something like that. I find one of the ways that it's easier to stitch with yarn because it's so thick a lot of times, and this is a thinner type yarn, but make sure that your needle is big enough, even though you can thread it through the eye of maybe a smaller needle. Sometimes it's hard to actually pull it through if your needle isn't big enough. So sometimes you want to think about the size of the needle, like the diameter of it, to be the same as the diameter of the yarn, and that way it's going to pull through really easily. Now, I'm not doing these stitching in each individual mark that's on this fabric, but just in some of them, and I kind of did it in a traveling upwards direction, and that just again leads your eye. I also really like that the darker color of this yarn matches some of those darker art marks that I added to the printable, and it kind of then just carries up and through the page from the middle here up into the left hand corner. And again, that was one of those instances there where I was trying out different placements. I had originally thought that was the good placement, but sometimes you can surprise yourself and move it around into a different spot. But I think I am going to go with that original placement. Now, I've kind of neglected the right side of the spread a little bit. And at this point, I was considering, do I just leave this and come back to the right side another time? There's no shame in that. There's nothing that says that you have to finish the left and right side in one sitting, but I decided that overall, even if I came back to it, I would want to keep it simple. I didn't want to overpower the left-hand side because there's a lot going on the left-hand side. So sometimes that's really good to play with the negative space and leave some of those areas left a little bit more blank on purpose. And so I added my Stabilo all and just made some more marks and doing it kind of in the same patterns as the left-hand side. So even though it's not exactly the same, that kind of elongated oval shape continues from the left all the way to the right side, adding in some pencil marks and I really could do more on the right side and even under the flap. And I considered, do I want to glue that flap down on the right? I think I'm going to leave it open for now. Maybe later I'll come back and I could add like something a little more secretive on the back of it, like a quote or a tag or something like that. Adding in some final gesso. I love the look of the lines of the page, but just making with some of that gesso means that those lines are not completely straight across all the time. And I'm gonna add in some of this the lines with the wooden skewer as well, taking away some of that paint. It just echoes a little bit from the left hand side all the way to the right hand side. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching this, and make sure to download that printable if you haven't already. It's free. The link is down below, as well as all the supplies that I use. I try to link those for you if I know where they're from. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one.